Welcome to the Laps of Maps channel. My name is Jeremy.
I'm Isabel, and in this video we're going to run through with you at home how to complete a post and pre-trip inspection on your vehicle. In this video we will give you valuable skills that you can practice yourself at home to familiarise yourself with your vehicle so you don't get stuck out in the bush because a little mechanical disaster happened that could have been avoided if you checked your car.
We're going to show you what to look for, how to look for it, and give you a couple of tips on the way.
The best way to ensure years of trouble-free touring is to develop a habit of checking underneath your bonnet and around your vehicle. So we're going to go in depth and explain what we check and why. First, we're going to do a full walk around of the vehicle. Now we have already taken it to the car wash and given it a bit of a clean, got all the mud and grime off, because you want to be able to see scratches, dents, cracks that are often hidden by excessive dirt. So at the front of the car, going to give the accessories a shake, make sure they're not loose. If they are, you'll know about it because they will be flopping around. Essentially, you want to look for any damage sustained from the tracks. If you're taking your vehicle into places like the Victorian High Country, you've got water crossings, big rocks and mud. And if you haven't got any under-vehicle body protection, this is the main focus to make sure nothing has been hit by a rock and is damaged underneath your carriage. But moving on, everything looks pretty good. Look around the side of the car, checking your roof racks, just give them a shake, and if they make any sort of sound, there's a problem there. So just check every single accessory bolted on your vehicle and just have a general look for damage. You know, make sure your mud flaps are on, nothing's hanging down. So we'll do a light check now.
As part of the outside check, we like to check our lights. Now that is the factory fronts and the rears. Any lights that you've put on as well, like your spotties, fog lights, any roof lights, you want to check them all. Now we're going to talk about wheels.
Now we're going to check one of the most crucial parts of your four-wheel drive, and that is your wheels. We think they're the most important part of your four-wheel drive because they are contacting the terrain at all times. You want to make sure your tyres are suited for the load you're carrying, as well as the terrain that you intend to travel into. Now there's two parts to the wheel. There's your rim and the tyre itself. Checking the rim, whether it's steel or aluminium, you are checking to see if there's any damage. Rust, buckles, dents, and essentially if your rim's in one piece. Moving on to the tyre, you want to check the tyre pressure and check it across all of your tyres to make sure that they're all the same. And the first thing I would check is how it's wearing. So you can rub your hand across the tyre from the inner to the outer edge, and you want to feel for feathering or if it's doing this. Now if your tyre is doing that, it's not a tyre problem, it's within your wheel alignment. A great tool to check your tread depth is a tread depth gauge. Once we've checked the tread, we want to check the outer and the inner sidewalls. Now that's looking for any deep cuts or slashes. Now these particular tyres are a 3-ply sidewall and their load rating is 1700 per tyre. Now that is a really tough construction tyre. Now mud terrain tyres are also known as off-road tyres, and they are used by us and emergency service vehicles in Victoria. Now if they run a tough tyre like that, why wouldn't you if you're travelling out in the bush?
So before we have a visual inspection underneath the bonnet, we want to listen to the motor. So we're going to start it up and I'm going to tell you a few things to listen to. All right, now the car's idling, what are we listening for? High-pitched squealing, a grinding noise, metallic knocks, and also you can hear, especially for diesels, you can hear injector knock when you're outside of the car. A lot easier than you can when you're inside.
When we're checking underneath the bonnet, we're looking for any signs of leaks, whether it's dripping or it's weeping. A weeping oil leak is something to monitor, but it gets serious when the leak starts to drip on the ground or drip in the motor and start splashing everywhere, because that ultimately means now your motor's losing that fluid. When checking the brake fluid, we're checking the level. Now it's supposed to be on the max mark, and if it's not, it means that you're likely got low brake pads or there's a leak in your system. Regardless, we want to top it up with the right fluid, which is in your owner's manual or it says here on top of the cap. Another check with your brake fluid is checking for its moisture content. So brake fluid is hygroscopic, means it wants to absorb moisture, but we don't want it to absorb moisture in the brake system. Moisture in the brake system leads to corrosion and bad braking performance. Now it does this because moisture in the brake fluid reduces the dry boiling point quite significantly. Don't mind the March fly.
So we're going to check our coolant as well. We want to check the level of it, make sure it's in between the minimum and the maximum. Now if you do have to top it up, if it is below the minimum, you want to use either pre-mixed coolant of the same type or demineralized water. We don't want to use tap water, that's no good. Another part of the engine cooling system is the thermo fan at the front here. Now you want to inspect the blades, make sure that they're all there, and you also want to make sure there's no white fatigue marks like creasing at the joins. And you want to feel it as well. If it spins too freely, it means it's not doing its job right. You want a little bit of resistance there. Most of the time the thermo fans like this one here are connected to the water pump, and the water pump is something you want to inspect as well. It's got a little leak hole if something does go wrong, and you just want to inspect that. For us, we would see the pink coolant coming out of it, but we're looking good. Another vital cooling system check is to make sure that your radiator isn't blocked. So you want to look down in there, get a torch preferably, and you're looking for any sort of build-up of mud, insects, seeds, anything that's blocking the airflow through the radiator. You want to remove it and make sure that it has the best amount of air going through it. So now we want to check the belts and the pulleys on the front of the motor here. All these run the accessories like the AC compressor, the alternator, our water pump. You want to make sure that these belts are in tip-top condition, and you want to practice at home replacing that. It's a very simple job, and it could mean whether you're waiting for a day or two for a tow truck in the middle of nowhere, or it could be a 20-minute to maybe an hour job. Well worth practicing doing that at home. Find someone on YouTube that's done your specific model of car and follow them. Of course, you want to top up your window washer fluid as well. We just like to put regular water in because you never know, you might need to drink it one day. You don't want to be drinking soap. You want to check your power steering fluid as well. You want to make sure it's within the minimum and maximum line. If you have to top it up, I'd recommend looking in your manual, and that'll tell you what fluid to top it up with. Most of the time it's automatic fluid, but you'll be surprised what you read from the manual. Now we're going to check the engine oil. Just want to make sure that the oil is at the full mark, so there'll be a minimum and a maximum. We want to make sure there's the most amount of oil in the motor. We're noting the colour. That looks like engine oil. If it doesn't look like engine oil, then that is a problem. Now we're going to check the air filter. So you want to inspect the airbox, make sure there's no cracks. You want to check the intake pipe going into the intake manifold of the turbo, depending on what sort of vehicle you've got, because you don't want unfiltered air going into the motor. Not a good idea. If you've just bought a second-hand vehicle and it's got a snorkel, actually check that the snorkel is connected to the airbox. I've seen it too many times, they're just there for show. Make sure you check it. You want to make sure that you have all your clips on your airbox. Inspect your air filter. Now, you can use compressed air if you know what you're doing. The best way to do it is just you want to tap it out. And then in here is the filtered clean air, and that's the clean side. We're good, no dust in there. We personally like to use the genuine air filter. We feel like it does seal a lot better. We have used aftermarket ones and we've noticed the clean side a bit dirty, so we personally use genuine filters. You want to make sure that there's no debris or bugs inside the airbox as well, because they're just going to clog your brand new filter up straight away. So a little do-it-yourself sort of job at home you can do to improve your fuel economy is cleaning your MAFS airflow sensor. Now this little sensor here measures the airflow going into the motor, so the computer can adjust the fuel to suit. And if it's dirty, it acts as a bit of an insulator. You have to buy this stuff specifically, the proper MAFS airflow sensor cleaner, because it doesn't leave any residue at all. Some contact cleaners can leave it. Just buy the proper stuff. That's it. You want to check the O-ring on your MAFS airflow sensor as well. If it's floppy or cracked, it's going to allow air into the motor that's unmetered, and that means your fuel economy will go up, and we don't want that. You can buy the O-rings on eBay pretty cheap. Another thing to check underneath the bonnet is security of items. So we're talking the battery. You just want to wiggle. If you've got brackets for secondary fuel filters or catch cans, make sure they're not rubbing on anything. Wires, you want to make sure that they're not rubbing on sharp edges.
Moving on to the front end of the vehicle now. Before we jack it up, we've turned the wheel to one side, and we will do one side at a time. Your rubber boots, particularly on your CVs, and on your steering rack, want to make sure that they're not split, because if they're split, that allows contaminants to get in there, get in between the grease, and then that's where problems start happening. So this is just a visual inspection. We will get a lever bar on all these front end components so we can actually feel for any movement. So we'll jack up the front end now and we'll check the steering and the wheel bearings. Canvas mat is a great little tool to have, especially when you're jacking up the car. Now we have here a bit of hardwood for our jack base and a 10-ton upgraded bottle jack, which is perfect for lifting the Hilux. Now before you lift the vehicle, you want to know where exactly to lift it. Check your owner's manual, it'll tell you exactly where you lift your car in how to change a tyre. Now I'm going to check the steering. This test can be used for IFS or live axle cars because what we're checking for is movement in the steering system. So left to right, wiggle the tyre like this and feel for any knocking movement or real wandery sort of feelings. This is really solid, that's good. We'll do this both sides because it's separate components either side. Now I'll check the wheel bearing. Similar sort of test, but it's the opposite. We go up and down and we wiggle the tyre like this. You physically feel a knocking sensation in the wheel bearings, but these tests are suitable for every single vehicle that has a wheel. With those simple tests done, we're going to check the brakes. The best way to check that is to physically remove the tyre.
So now that we have the wheel off, we're looking for brake pad wear and we're looking at other components on the vehicle that is normally hidden by the wheel. Now it's not hard to rip the wheel off, but you have got to do it safely. So we've got our caliper here and there's the brake pads, and you want to check that these brake pads are wearing evenly. So if you have noticed that one of your brake pads is wearing a lot faster than the other, it means there is a caliper issue and you've got to take that to your mechanic straight away. So a great tool to invest in is a torque wrench, because if you are taking your wheels on and off, wheel nuts are not a bolt you want to be guessing how tight they are, because that can result in wheels coming off on the highway. So invest in a torque wrench and you'll be safe. So now we're going to check the steering and the suspension components. We've got our trusty pry bar here. You're going to need this to be able to put some force on these bushes. What are we checking? We want to check all of the rubber bushes in this area. Now, you have to check these components when there's no weight on the wheels, because if you have weight on the wheel, it's got a ton of force on all these bushes and you won't be able to move them. So you need to take the weight off it and then you can then be able to pry it. We're going to check our sway bar links. Going to see that there's no movement in them. So when I'm prying on parts, I'm trying to see if I can feel a knock. If I don't get any movement at all, that's good. Even if the part doesn't have any movement, like this sway bar bush here, see how it's very swollen? It means that that part's wearing, so we're actually going to replace that very soon. We're going to check our lower shock bearing. Same deal, no play there. Right, so this is a great little test for both solid axles and IFS vehicles. You want to take the weight off both the front wheels, you want to put them on a hard lock, and then you want to rotate them. So what you're looking for is CV bind up. And what that is you'll be rotating, all of a sudden it'll stop. And you might have to go back and then it might go again. That's CV bind up, we don't want that. IFS vehicles and big lifts, it's no good. And we want to check the upper and lower ball joints for IFS vehicles. So we get our lever bar down here, and yep. No play there. Another check we like to do with all vehicles is we like to check the bump stops. So that's something to look at. If your bump stops are shiny, you might have wrong springs or maybe just driving too hard. We like to look around all of our wheel arches because you never know what you'll see, and you can see different angles inside of different parts of the car. So get your torch and just have a look, you can see all parts of your car. There's your exhaust, there's a fuel tank. You can spot rust this way as well. So the final part of the check is checking the underbelly of the vehicle. So first we get our torch. We just get down and have a bit of a look. I'm looking for wet patches. I'm looking for dangling wires, anything that's been ripped out. Looking for debris like big sticks that are caught up in the side step or underneath the vehicle somewhere. So we'll get down and have a better look because there's a few other things we want to check as well. Right, we're underneath the vehicle now. We're going to check the exhaust. So we want to make sure that all the mounts are there. You see these rubber mounts. We're looking for rust on the joins and welds. This is a big stainless steel system, so she should outlast the car. You want to check for exhaust leaks as well. What do they look like? You'd see like a little bit of soot around here if there was a hole there, like the end of your tailpipe. If you've got exhaust leaks, you want to get them sorted out. Check your flex joint as well. So now we're going to check the drive shaft. We want to check the center bearing, make sure that there's not too much excess play in that. That's looking good. We want to check the uni joints. Now we've got the vehicle in neutral and handbrake off with the wheels chocked so we can get a bit of play. So you grab one side and grab the other and you try and twist them apart. Tiny little bit in there, but that's nothing. You're taking note of these areas around here where the drive shafts come out of. That's where oil leaks can form. So you've got sliding yokes on some drive shafts as well. You want to make sure that there's not too much excess play in that. Same deal again. Bit of play, but that's not too bad. No oil leaks coming out of the diff as well. You want to look at your fuel tank, make sure there's no leaks. Make sure that if you've got a plastic bash guard that it's still there. This old girl's made of steel, tough as. You want to make sure that all your cables are secure. I'll have to do something with that. So we're at the rear of the vehicle now. You want to look at your spare, make sure that it's inflated. Is it the same size if you've just bought a second-hand vehicle? So tow bars are famous for rattling loose. So you just want to inspect all of the bolts and make sure that they're tight. So like the front of the vehicle, we want to inspect any brake lines and also ABS lines at the rear. We've got an air operated diff locker, so we want to make sure that that air line is nice and secured. And also our diff breathers as well. So any cables, hoses at the back of it, you want to make sure they're not dangling down. They can get caught up underneath sticks, and you want to make sure that they're nice and high up. For us, we're going to inspect our leaf springs. For coil people, inspect the coils. For the leaf spring people, you want to look at the condition of your U-bolts, make sure that they're not bent. We're making sure that none of the leaves are cracked. We're looking at the shackle bushes either end, the U-bolts, and we're also want to take note of how inverted our spring is. We're having a look at our shock absorber as well, like we did with the front, making sure there is no leaks. So you want to look at the ends of your axles because a lot of oil seals are around this area. ABS oil seals, you've got the main axle oil seal in there. So this is an area where oil leaks can form. So just inspect here, and if you do see it, get that addressed straight away because that oil is going onto your brakes and that is not good at all. So you want to check all your driveline oils, the front diff, transfer case, manual transmission, automatic if you can, and of course the rear diff as well. While we're under here, here's a little four-wheel drive tip. You want to take note of all the low points of your vehicle. Now, if you take note of your low points and next time you go four-wheel driving, you now know where to place your wheels to be able to avoid hitting these low points on your vehicle. So it's a really good tip to understand what's underneath here. Now, this next check is for people with winches on the front of their vehicle. Now, if you're about to go on a trip, it's very important to check it because you want to make sure that this winch actually works before getting stuck out in the tracks. So what are we looking for? We're making sure that our control box is secure on there. We want to make sure that we've got the remote and you want to make sure that it all works. So you may say to yourself, I've never used my winch in 3 years, it'll be fine. Letting a winch stay there at idle is actually one of the worst things for it. You really want to be able to operate them regularly to be able to get moisture that could be built up in there, heat it up, get rid of it, and also lubricate all the gears as well. Leaving them at idle is actually not a good idea. So we're going to check ours because we haven't used ours in a while either, because our car's a rig. All right, winch plugs in, then we want to make sure that it works. Now you don't want to operate the winch too long without the car running, but for the audio's sake, we're not going to run the vehicle. So we're looking at the winch hook and inspect the wires or the rope, depending on what sort of material you're using. And you want to make sure that your free spool works and then the control puts it back in. It's a bit noisy, so I think I'm going to have to pull this one apart. But that's the checks you want to do before going out on a trip.
So that's it for our inspection, what we check after a big trip. Now you can do this on any vehicle, and it's a great idea to do this because it gets you more familiar with your car, and hopefully us explaining a few more things in depth has given you some skills at home.
Now if you have learned anything, please let us know. If you want us to go into more depth on a subject, let us know in the comments as well. We'd love to hear them and we'll try and do a video for you guys. But thank you for watching and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.